When you have the left side and the right side of the brain, now the left side controls the right. The left side is what's predominantly known for creativity in the arts. The right side, however, is the more analytical side. When an event happens that's shocking to the system, that's horrific, if you will, it's like taking a snapshot, and it freezes in one side of the brain and it locks it there. Now, if this isn't dealt with or a resolve isn't met over time, this becomes embedded in different sights, smells, or sounds, make a person react in different ways. So, with that being said, you have the right brain with this incident closed off to the left brain. Currently, the treatments that are becoming highly successful are EMDR, which mimics rapid eye movement. By doing this, it creates a neurological bridge from one hemisphere to the other, thereby dropping the wall and letting the analytical side be connected with the creativity. Basically, it brings reason to the event. The traumatic incidents then unfold as they will, and one's able to heal and recover from what they endured. Now, if you will, take a person, before I get to this, I'm not a doctor, and not downplaying one person's trauma to another. This is just how it's explained. If you take one person who's been through something very traumatic, due to the various different body chemistries we all have, we're going to react to it in a different way. Now, if you take someone, combat veterans are the best example of this, who's been exposed time after time after time, but for a long duration, not only do you have that snapshot locked in place, but the brain is also used to increasing the amount of adrenaline, cortisol, those hormones. This is actually being discovered lately, that the brain structure has changed over time. So one can become more resilient, but however, saying that PTSD or traumatic events are unrecoverable from is false. This is because if one can get in a routine of meditation or introduce something they love over time, then that trauma essentially can fade, lessen, or go away completely. Either way, the brain and the human body, being as miraculous as it is, does recover and reverts to its normal stasis at some point or regard. So I think the biggest thing we deal with and we see is not only the veteran suicide rate, currently 23 a month, or 23 a day, but that delivers the message that there's a loss of hope. It's also compounded with the message that when our brothers and sisters leave service, they don't have a mission anymore. They're used to a mission. They've wore the uniform. But they don't have a mission when they come out. So it's a responsibility of everyone I always talk to say, hey, if you know someone and they're suffering, and this doesn't have to be a veteran at all, give them a mission in life. One of my friends wrote a book on gardening. I wouldn't know who that is. But his way is different than mine. I use the arts and he uses gardening. It's a deal. But they're both very therapeutic, and I would say a lot better ways of dealing with an issue than drinking or drugs or whatever it is. So instead of saying we need to cure the problem, maybe we just need to focus with our generation to stabilize things. And then gradually they'll become better. We don't have to go out and be heroes to everyone we meet. We just have to be advocates that point people in the right direction. So to get to this, what I found over time is there's a connection. I'm still working on this connection, if you will. And I use writing as a way of healing, but after doing some research, I found that the Army's current methods, called aversion therapy, has roughly a 20% success rate. Now it is successful, so if it works for you, great. And what I'll explain aversion therapy is for an individual to write out all the emotional pain, and they can either bury it, burn it, they discard it. It's a method of taking the pain, going through the arm, and in a physical motion they write it out to the pen. And when they're done, they release it and they give it off, they hand off the pain. This works for some, but not all. Now, I had some very deep-seated trauma. This is not bragging at all, but it's to explain the nature of how deep it was. 46 months deployed. And with that, in 2003, I entered the hole called Sadr City. Right? It was with the invasion force. So it took 3 weeks to overrun the country, and then we stayed embedded for many months after that. Every month we were told, we're going to go home the next month on the 5th, and we never did. And after a while, communication got cut off from home for obvious reasons. There was no infrastructure. All of us in that unit at the time, I remembered many lengthy conversations for about 2 to 3 weeks. Thought we were really dead. It was like a movie. We were dead, but there's no way to communicate that to the outside world to receive validation that we were alive. And that was scary. That still is something that is very difficult to deal with. So I tell myself often, if I smack myself or pinch myself, and I feel that, I am in that moment and I feel it, I must be alive. Something is happening. And it kind of wakes me up. But more so, I found that instead of just writing things out, there's a deeper relation. There's something specific to PTSD victims. And with that, I had to go back to the basics. I began to pursue a degree in English. By doing that, I found out learning the very real mechanics of writing, who I credit often Strunk and White, Elements of Style. Right, Robbie?
That's true.
So they teach the very basic forms, but Strunk has and White, they have a very good point on one of their most profound rules of all. Every writer should have, especially guys who suffer from anxiety or anger, PTSD, whatever their symptoms, is omit needless words. And why? Because when you are dealing with PTSD, you can get frustrated pretty easily. So there was connection one. If I could shorten things and make them easier in my writing, I needed to do it. It only happened by study. Step 2, which was one of the more profound steps that I'd like to discuss, is the creativity part. It wasn't just introducing creativity to the writing, which is well needed, but it was also freeing my soul from bondage through creativity. So by this, one of the books I always like to tell people about is Rebecca McClanahan's Word Painter. I'm not advertising this, I'm saying this is like the writer's Bible, along with Strunk and White. Rebecca gives a really good example. She says, take an example of a doll, and we'll compare the two. You have a white doll with blonde hair and red cheeks. Great. Now if I say you have a porcelain doll with milky white skin, rosy red colored cheeks, and silky blonde hair. The second one obviously begs the better description. So now I needed to figure out how could I be descriptive without rambling? Because the description was the fuel. It drove me to continue my work because I had to tell the details to the person reading. And I had to open up the mind of the reader to let them fill in the blank. I had to give them the empty room with the canvas and the crayons, their creativity, and let them paint the picture. That's also a freeing sense for the reader. They may see one thing in a book and another may see a different perspective. Either way, they're getting the soul point and they're more engaged in the story. For the writer, however, that's the trick, and it was also the second mission. So I put together Strunk and White's book, or on top of that, any creative writing book you can find. Most of them offer very good pieces of advice, along with Rebecca McClanahan's book, and I merged the two and I said, there it is. There's the link. It's the creativity with knowing the mechanics, the underlying mechanics of writing. And by doing this, I was able to come up with something that was like I wouldn't say it's an advanced version, but it's going deeper than just writing things out. It's taking the frustration of writing stuff out. You may get to a part as a writer and you're writing something very deep, and then you actually have frustration or annoyance and you just want to walk away. How do you train yourself to do that? You study deeper. So with that, I found that the writing began to flow, and then it would stop. and then it would flow, and then it would stop, and over. I'm like, what is this? Oh, writer's block is what it's called. That was frustrating as well because it was more self-defeating than anything. So I found some wise words from Stephen King, and he says, when you're going to write, basically any art, you put yourself in a schedule and a routine, and you do it every day at the same time. And if you can't do it for long that day, if you can't write for long, make yourself sit there for 10 minutes. It's like keeping yourself accountable for what happened. So with that, I began to write more, carry on with the work, and was recently told that, from reading the first book I wrote to reading the second or the third that's currently undergoing things, the writing had changed. I had not seen that my writing had changed, but someone else did. They seen that the style had changed, the writing become better. So inherently, there's something there if my writing has changed, and I was never really good at anything like that. But I just had a passion for it. The passion drove myself to find a treatment that was much better than alcohol. I've been sober about 3 years now. And why I bring that up, that brings me to another key piece of writing, was when I got back from one of the last deployments, I couldn't sleep. It was very hard. It was hard because every time I would go to sleep, I would have a dream, and every time I would have a dream, it was a ludicrous nightmare. An analogy I just used earlier today was we'd be fighting the insurgents, my friends who I served with, in some random alley or city in Baghdad. And in this place, the insurgents were like super strength. They were like Mario and Luigi on crack cocaine. They would jump the walls. And as they were about to beat us down, I'd wake up, because often when we would shoot back in the dreams, flowers would come out of our guns, or our guns would melt or something. It was like the power was restricted. Then I kept dreaming, and all I could see was the faces of the dead, and that was horrible. It was horrendous. I didn't want to wake up and see them anymore, so I drank. I drank at such an incessant level, it was disgusting. I remember I was sitting at home one day, this is in Colorado Springs. I was watching a movie, and the song Claire de Lune came on. I didn't know what the song name was at the time, but it resonated, it burned inside. It said, you need to get more of that song and learn it. You need to play it. You need to figure it out. Even if it takes you a lifetime, go do it. I had never played piano in my life. I was never good at instruments. So by doing this, I found an old piano on a website for about $85, and then took it home, deeply sanded it, fixed it up over time. With the writing and the playing every day, I noticed that the dreams started to stop. It became more healthy to sleep. The drinking also decreased. And that's why I'm sober 3 years now. So anytime I get in that state, it's like write or play the piano. I can't stress enough that when I was younger, unhealthy habits, things like that seemed so freeing and engaging. It was okay to do it. It really was. But those unhealthy habits, because they couldn't be controlled, would be the death of me. And in a sense it was the death of my old self. Which brings me to some wise words I'd like to share with everyone. I was recently given a gift. I was given the audience of the Arch Abbot at St. Mindred Monastery, and I was able to sit down with him for an hour, and while sitting down with him, I found out that he was a personal inspiration of Mother Teresa herself. His letters back and forth to Mother Teresa are archived in the St. Mindred Monastery. Now when I asked, he's a very real man. If you need to shut up, he tells you to shut up. If you need to go away, he says, get out of here, I don't want to talk to you. He's a senior abbot in the church, okay. And that's why Mother Teresa loved him so much, is because when he would talk to them, he would be very real, and he wouldn't be sugarcoating things. He would tell them, be real in your faith, and he would always tell them, sisters, you need to straighten up. And she's like, that's what we need to hear. Because he said the one thing about Mother Teresa was, she lived the poor in her heart and her mind. And so I said, tell me a story about her. Tell me something you remember very well. So he brings up this story about when she was in Manhattan, a poorhouse was opened up, and it was given many $1 million for this house to be, or this building, if you will, is going to serve for the sick. And so as she's walking through the building, she's like, this is great, I love it. And one of the contractors was like, well, we need to put an elevator in here. We need to move the patients from the floor where they check in at the top all the way to the bottom where they'll stay in sick bay. She's like, no, we're not spending extra money on anything we don't need to. That's maybe convenient, but we're not going to do this. So the contractor says, well, how do you intend to move the poor? And she says, on our backs. And she lived that. Well, the next day, she comes in to check out the building again, and they had already started construction for an elevator. And without a word, she walks out. Multi-million-dollar building empty. She decided that no matter what, she was going to live where she was called, and she lived it to a T, and that's what made her great. He says she wasn't anything abnormal. She wasn't a superhuman. The fact that she stayed true to herself. Being to thyself be true, he kept repeating during this lunch. And that was the final thing that unlocked within myself about how to heal from these emotions. Yes, there's a lot of work. I'm a broken individual, aren't we all? But I asked him, I said, okay, Shakespeare, explain exactly in layman terms what that means so I can understand this and pass it on, because I got it. Okay, you need to do things for yourself that are good. I've heard a million explanations, but I'm not absorbing it in my brain. What does it mean? So to thyself be true means this. In life, you're going to find your calling if you listen to it. I'm like, okay, I don't do that very well, but go on. And he says, your calling can be easily found if you find out what it is naturally you're good at, compound it with what you naturally have a love for. So, you may be good at woodworking, but you may really love basket weaving. So if you do something that you're really good at, and you never pursue what you really love, your mind will always be where you really love things. It will never fully be with what you're doing. Like, okay, well, once I find that, I said, I think I found it. I love writing, but I get so much flack. How do I stay the course? He's like, you're a really slow student, aren't you? Yeah, to a point. He says it's simple. And a lot of people think it's so difficult. But really, the most simple things in life are hard. So, okay, what is this? He says, when you find out what it is you love and you do naturally, take all the people who are in your life, find out who is going to nurture that and make it grow. Find out who is going to continually help you become a better version of yourself. One step up. Always. One step up. The people who don't do this for your life are going to make you stay the same, which you won't progress, or they're going to drag you down. He said, everybody who's not doing the one step up thing for your life, get rid of them. I'm like, whoa, Father, you and my mother have been arguing for years. What do you say? That is your mother. You shut up now. Listen. Okay. So, he says yes, but the majority of people, when they're involved with you directly on day to day, surround yourself with nothing but the people who are better than you and can show you the way, who support you in what your work, regardless of all your fallible traits. He's like, do you think you're perfect? I'm like, no. He's like, that's the answer everybody should give, because no one is. He's like, except for God. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, I've heard that a million times, but it clicked on that moment. I was like, everybody answers that same thing. So we all need to pick and choose who we surround ourselves with. Why? The end note is, because as human beings, we're creatures of habit. So even unknowingly, if I hang around guy X or guy Y or guy Z, one of them may be calm and quiet, never say anything, or give a hint that he is not leading me to my higher self. But by the psychology and very nature of seeing what he does or hearing his story or talk or whatever, I'm going to naturally be brought down. So he says the key to a happy life, happiness, is in your own personal fulfillment of staying true to yourself. And he's like, that's what you work on. So go through a list, know everybody that is going to affect you. Get rid of the ones who don't help you positively. So that's kind of the conclusion of where all this is brought about. Don't be afraid to face your fears. if you surround yourself with the right people, they'll help you face your fears. They'll help you do wonders. They'll help you become the next better person. And when you get to becoming the next better person, be comfortable in yourself and then find a way to progress farther. So in that, when things are, reason why I bring out the Purple Heart is I got, the one building you seen first in the video got blown up is because when I got hit in the neck, we fought for like 3 more hours. And then we pulled back, and that's the building that blew up. I was like, somebody threw a missile in the building because they messed with the wrong guy. And also, this is the most important award I've ever got, because I believe, you know, a lot of awards are kind of given out nowadays. And I don't know everybody's individual case, but this one's pretty strict to get. It took me, I just got this a couple months ago, and this was in 2008 when I got hit. So that's why I hold this, and I say, okay, so those are the things I'll focus on. No other Baylor awards, they don't mean anything, but that one is the more sacrifice. Plus, many people I knew who've got it have died. So I encourage everyone in here to do just one thing. If you see someone that's in trouble, or you know they're in trouble, or they're drinking, their life's going down the toilet, well, either be that person who's going to help them ascend to the next higher level, or decide you're going to get out of their life. If you know, maybe you have to say mean things, but make sure it's to wake them up. Be the ascension part, don't be the descent. Anyway, that's about it. Any questions from anyone right now? There's a big power struggle. So the militia leader, which is actually what brings us to ISIS today, but I'm going to get directly to that. Okay, humps. So, Muqtada al-Sadr, back then, in about 05, 06, he was being investigated as raising militia. Even back then, it was declared that the man could be potentially as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than Hitler if given the right opportunity and power, which you see ISIS now, and before it was Jaysh al-Mahdi. So, Muqtada has close ties to Iran, and Iranian EFPs, which are copper plates, C4, and when they pack, it turns into this big bullet, and it's very precise to go through all kinds of vehicles, armor, you name it. He started getting supplies from Iran and troops, and so he formed his militia. It grew to a very large number in Baghdad, and then they strategically hit every checkpoint for about 3 days. So 3 days prior to this big battle being kicked off, they were wiping out the checkpoints. I mean, it was just walking out there, guys laying dead everywhere. And then the worst part of it was we'd meet up with somebody who was dressed like an Iraqi soldier or Iraqi policeman, and then before we know it, they're shooting at us. So everybody that looked good was shooting at us, and we just firing in all directions. So one point there was a chair about that size. It was the only thing I had for cover on the rooftop, and everywhere I was like, "Here's my rosary." I'm sorry. So, but with that is prior to, as he was starting his initial attacks to test defenses, he was launching rockets into the green zone from the Sadr city area. So what came down was the order is, how do we stop these guys, because they're coming everywhere and they're firing these rockets and they're hitting the green zone, disrupting operations. They're trying to kill the communications, take over checkpoints, take Baghdad. If you take Baghdad, you don't just take Baghdad, you take Iraq. And once you take Iraq, you're essentially taking over Afghanistan. The initiative was Iraq, Afghanistan. What's in the middle? Iran. Put it together. So, the reason why they said, okay, the army said, we're going to build this wall, this massive concrete wall, layer by layer by layer. And we're going to build it 5 miles long. And we're going to surround the city and only open up certain points for checkpoints. They can go in, they can come out, but we can regulate them. This is inherent to an Israeli fighting tactic that was done, but it's also biblically based of the people in Nineveh, who were they were building a wall with one hand and fighting, holding a weapon in another. So we were going back there doing something that was biblical in nature, and it worked. So we put up this wall, and it took a very long time. But as it would happen, there were city blocks on both sides, and we would do some fighting. But we would get to a 4-way intersection, and at that 4-way intersection, that's when all hell would break loose, for lack of better terms. So they had time as we were back. We were moving slab by slab, and it was very slow. And they were already setting up their next attack point at an intersection, which we hadn't secured. and that's where the worst fighting was. So we would fight for every inch, literally, at the intersections. To put down, we'd have to stop. They'd blow up the crane arm would come in and set down this big chunk of concrete, the size of up from here, the size of the ceiling roughly, or they'd blow up the crane. And after a while, there's only so many cranes in Iraq, and so many Iraqi operators who aren't coming out anymore. So we're like, we got to figure something out. Increased firepower. You can see in a detailed description in the book, in the movie American Sniper, they show a part where a soldier is shot on the wall, falls back, and it's Nathan Bagwell. It's funny about Nathan Bagwell. The 7.62 round ricocheted off his hip and came out. He's now in a wheelchair for life. But when he was in the operating room, we stopped operations, took him out, medevaced him, got in the operating room. Everybody's standing in there and they're freaking out, and he's kind of coughing, turning pale. All you can do is just stand there and watch your buddy and just say, "Okay, Doc, you got this. Doc, I ain't touching this shit." And while they're reading off his stats, he's kind of like, heart's going fast. And all of a sudden, you see Bagwell reach up and he grabs the Doc and he's like, "Tell her I love her." And we're like, "Oh shit." Doc's like, "Who?" He's like, "Nothing, man. I just always want to say that in a time like this." Like, you son of a. So I was like, what is the notion behind being sarcastic and that's defense mechanism? And he's still a very well-spirited guy. But back to that. So we were on the process. All the men out there was a whole slew of people fighting this battle. On the process of eliminating the enemy, and the order came down, stop. Why? Well, they're almost eliminated, leave them alone. Okay. Now they've regrouped. They formed a little group called ISIS. So I can tell you this firsthand. They're a bunch of wusses, okay? So if they're doing a little propaganda, no, you're not. I even put my address on Facebook and was like, "Hey, you're looking for guys? I got a cabin up here in Alaska and I'm ready to go." So they haven't come yet. And if they are, I'm not there. So spread that word too. I guarantee you guys, these guys are cowards, straight up. Met a lot of them. They don't do stand-up. They hide behind cover and shoot you. Anyway, so that's it. There you go. Hope that explains it. Back.
It's very nice, Anthony. I appreciate it every time I hear you speak. My name is Eddie Payne. I'm from Point Man of Owensboro. I am a part of a bigger group than we are, but we decided to make our own group in Owensboro, Kentucky. Just going to read you guys our mission statement, and then any questions you have, you can ask me after this. Point Man Ministries of Owensboro is a safe refuge for veterans. Whether they left the military decades ago or recently have returned to civilian life, they can turn to us for help. The support from our members who have been there, hurting veterans, can realize that they're not alone. We serve as facilitators by connecting veterans with resources and support within the community. We believe that it's our responsibility as a community, not a government, to transition our warriors back home. We offer spiritual healing as an interdenominational conduit, to a stronger faith in Jesus Christ, and we encourage our members to serve others, thereby nurturing their own healing and self-worth. With that being said, what I've done is basically peer-to-peer. I will go to people's homes. I will find them jobs if I can, resources, give them medical advice. Just give them some sort of mission or purpose in life. And I've had a lot of help with the people that I've been introduced to. It's been pretty amazing. We are needing more help. And I'm not talking about resources as money, because money is really not the thing. It does take money for certain things, yes, but I don't want to gain anything out of this other than help my fellow veterans, period. Very passionate about this. I waited for my own mission, and I think this is mine. Like Anthony was talking about, I had many struggles, and when I came home I thought there was nothing out there, and there wasn't. I couldn't find anything. It took many years, and I think I just had to work through some things on my own. Just want to help, honestly. That's really all I got. If anybody has any questions.
So can we get involved by, I mean, it's not too far from Nashville. I got some musical connections here and get some of these guys out. I think veterans often make some of the best songwriters. I know some of you know Ian Thompson, who's a phenomenal songwriter.
Yeah.
I mean, his music makes my playlist about every other morning having coffee, because I got like 4 playlists and that I enjoy it, and it's really healing. And I picked on him more than anybody when he went through my certification process. I was saying, I don't believe you. You don't sound convincing. He's like, you don't believe me? Stuff I've been through. You don't believe me? And but now he is believable. And I think that just hearing both of you talk, I mean, gardening is art too, and I'm a big fan of gardening. We were just talking about that. I grew up having a garden too, and it does seem like that. Who was it, Robbie, that said one of the founding fathers of our country says our sons will fight wars so their sons can be scientists and engineers, so their sons can be poets and musicians. You know, I just hearing this, I keep harkening back to that. And, I want to be able to do something.
Well, I can give you my card and anything that we're able to
Yeah.
coincide would be great. Yes, Rob?
So for me, and I know I represent a lot of civilian, kind of the civilian mentality. I think we sometimes have a hard time wrapping our heads around why a warfighter would struggle. You know, I mean, would you guys agree? Sometimes the average civilian would go, oh, "Come on, you know, they've done some amazing stuff. They're heroes." You know, we're taught to think of that. So I think when we hear about heroes struggling, it's, I don't think it registers really as a struggle, as a legitimate struggle in a lot of our minds. Can you give us an example in your own life of how, the way in which you struggled coming back, and how the kind of help that you received that helped you kind of get over moving on to the next step?
Oh, I'd have to say to that, my struggles coming home were pretty severe. Within, I'd say the first year, I was already drinking a 5th of whiskey and probably a case of beer a night. And I wasn't a drinker before all this. And I really didn't understand what was going on for the longest time, because I didn't have a whole lot of veteran communities around me. I didn't have a whole lot of support from family and friends. They just pretty much martyred me and didn't really know how to understand me. So a lot of it I had to do on my own, but it was just figuring out, people don't understand we're trained for war. That's what we train for. And when we come back here, we have no purpose. I mean, we could go work in factories, we could do all these things, but what our routine was doing every day was fighting war, training for war. The things that we've done and we've seen, we're proud of what we've done, but it scars the mind. Period, point blank, it scars the mind. I always thought that I was a very strong person, and when I came back, I felt like I was the weakest person in the world. I couldn't control my family, which you shouldn't control your family, I understand that. But what I mean by saying that is I didn't know how to talk to anybody. I didn't know how to communicate. I would get so angry about the littlest stuff. So my way of not getting any help at first was just to self-medicate and to keep all the things that I had inside of me to me, so I wouldn't hurt anybody else. I didn't want anybody to have to feel the pain that I had to feel every day. Now, like Tony was saying, I mean, I don't even see these people in my dreams. I could just be driving down the road and the faces flash upon my eyes. And they don't go away. They can stay there for months. So with my struggles and going through all kinds of psychotherapy and CBT and all these things, I finally met one great person at a rehab center that is actually a drug and alcohol counselor, and he was a teacher. He contacted Point Man of Newburgh and got some started just for me, so that gave me hope. And he believed in me. I still ended up in the hospital 3 or 4 times after that, but each time I was getting a little bit stronger. I've been clean now for 6 months. haven't touched anything and don't care to touch anything. I didn't care to touch anything before the fact. I just didn't know how else to do it. And when I would go to the VA, they would just keep giving me more and more and more medication. My advice to everybody is communication. Peer-to-peer therapy with your fellow veterans has been huge. I've watched it. I've watched 3 lives change in the year that we've been there. And, I mean, big changes. Guys that couldn't even talk, that are talking about everything. They're communicating with their families. They're not getting divorces anymore. They're becoming functional members of society again. And that, the feeling is amazing. It really is. And that's all I really need out of all this is just to get help, get resources to help these guys, to make everybody understand that, I mean, they were soldiers. I mean, there had to be somebody special before that, and when they come back and they're all broken, I think that it's our obligation to help them in whatever way we can. I mean, and I'm passionate about that. I feel like I'm going to do anything I can to orchestrate anything I can. But I am growing, I'm learning, and you guys have been a huge help. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your time.